Hi, Meta Spencer, and today I'm delighted to say I'm going to sort of revisit my old, earlier phase of my own career when I was teaching peace studies at the University of Toronto, and uh, and so I haven't been really in touch with either my old colleagues, and there were many of them in those days, or the people who are doing teaching peace studies today. And so I'm going to do that. Let's talk about what has happened to the whole business of teaching peace at university level. So I've invited three people who are doing that now, and are all friends of mine. Some longtime friends, some not quite so long. So the first person to introduce is somebody who's really still in a peace and conflict program, still exists. And he is Nathan Funk, who's an associate professor and chair of the Peace and Conflict Studies program at Conrad Grebel University College at the University of Waterloo, which is here in Ontario. His research and writing address religious and cultural dimensions of conflict and peacemaking. And he focuses especially on the Middle Eastern context. And now Erika Simpson is an associate professor of international relations at Western University, also here in Ontario, specializing in international security, nuclear proliferation, and peacekeeping. She teaches undergraduate courses on global diplomacy, international security, and Canadian foreign policy, and focuses on topics like nuclear waste and NATO.
Nuclear weapons. Yeah.
And Carolyn Stephenson, I've known the longest. I think we met nearly 50 years ago. And she's an associate professor of political science at the University of Hawaii. And she directs the Hawaii Model United Nations and teaches in the university's conflict resolution program, which I'm glad to know has some continuing existence. Let's start with sort of reminiscing, because my memory was we met in an organization called COPRED, which was an acronym for something, and it was a peace studies program where we brought in people who did all kinds of things for peace, including teaching in universities, and they were burgeoning in those days. I can claim to actually have created a peace studies program at my college, and I ran it for 15 years. And I think probably everybody's had some hand in creating the program, which, they all went along pretty well, growing until the end of the Cold War, if in fact we could say never really ended. But then the popularity declined, and they have been chopping off peace studies programs and assimilating the courses into other things in many places. So I'd like for you to give us your own little trajectory, Carolyn. What happened to you since we knew each other well all those years ago, and what happened to your program?
Well, I haven't gone anywhere. I probably at that time was director of peace studies at Colgate, which had the first undergraduate chair in peace studies. It was the second undergraduate program in peace studies. Manchester College was the first one, and I had gone to graduate school in political science and international relations, and I had never heard of peace studies. By chance, I met the then director of the Colgate Peace Studies program, and he said they were looking for a new director. And would I please be able to teach both nonviolent action and conflict resolution? And I said, I don't know anything about either of those. I'm an international relations scholar who studies the UN and international organization. Well, I learned it very quickly, and those subsequently became two of my most important fields. And then I became involved in COPRED and in IPRA. IPRA is the International Peace Research Association, and that was actually formed first.
Ken and Elise Boulding, who created
Elise and Kenneth Boulding and others, and IPRA was research focused. A lot of the early peace studies work was research based. So you can trace it back to scholars like Quincy Wright, who was also probably the founder of international relations as well, and Lewis Richardson. And then eventually COPRED got formed. Actually, your Canadian Peace Research and Education Association got formed before COPRED. It was 1966, and COPRED didn't get formed until 1970. And COPRED incorporated, it was the Consortium on Peace Research, Education, and Development, with an emphasis on research, on education, and on peace action. So that became significant. And then, as you said, Peace Studies Association got formed later, particularly by those who were interested in education, and this was at the time of big concern in nuclear weapons and disarmament and so on. And since then,
sorry, but I think that the issue there, I was engaged with that debate about whether to change COPRED, and I think it was fairly typical in that period for people who were in universities to want to set up a professional association, because that looks good on your vita. But if the COPRED at first included a lot of local organizers, community development people, or people who did not have any special credentials. So the debate was there: do we want to make this a highfalutin professional association or not? And a lot came out of that debate, eventually winding up as Peace Studies Association. Is that right?
Yes.
Election, right?
Yeah. The Peace Studies Association was finally developed in 1987 after all of the concerns over the Reagan buildup in nuclear weapons in the early 1980s. So a lot of the focus was on the professionalization of arms control and disarmament. But it also had the concerns that came out of the civil rights movement. So there was a justice emphasis as well. And there's always been that tension, and I think continues to be that tension over what Johann Galtung called negative peace. Peace is the absence of war, and positive peace, or peace as the absence of war in the presence of social justice. And that debate continues. What wasn't there, interestingly enough, was environment. I have always been interested in environmental issues. I was one of the founders as well of the environmental studies section of the environment of the International Studies Association back in the 70s. And I have always pushed for the inclusion of environment. But when Galtung was here in Hawaii for 5 years and we tried to put together unsuccessfully a master's program, he was adamant that that environment had nothing to do with peace studies. He changed his mind later on, but he was absolutely adamant that we not include environment courses. So the undergraduate course I'm teaching this semester is Global Environmental Studies, and it is now also a part of the Peace Studies program.
Well, that's good to know. Okay, now when did you go to Hawaii, and what has happened to the Peace Studies program there since you've been there?
It has deteriorated, as Peace Studies, I think, has in lots of places. I came to Hawaii in 1985, and that was the year that both Peace Studies and conflict resolution independently got created here. The conflict resolution people were much more interested in training domestic mediators. And the Peace Studies people were interested in all the things that we've just been talking about. And eventually, the two were forced together after the Pew funding ran out for Peace Studies. They helped to found 18 different conflict resolution programs around the U.S., and they set them on their way, and eventually they set them free. And when the money ran out, the University of Hawaii said, we're going to force Peace Studies and conflict resolution together. Well, there were only two of us who actually did both those fields. So there was a lot of conflict over where the emphasis was going to be on that.
Excuse me, is that other person Obama's sister?
No, Maya Sotoro, who is now part of our Peace Studies program and is Obama's sister, was still in high school at that point.
Oh,
she was actually my daughter's best friend in high school.
So she is teaching, as she does specialize in conflict resolution now, as
not so much conflict resolution. She really specializes in peace education, and so her background is in the field of education. You are in
the sort of in the same department, although you're not really. It's not a single focus.
Yeah, I'm officially in political science and always have been. And she is officially in the Matsunaga Institute for Peace, which has both the conflict resolution graduate degree and the undergraduate Peace Studies program.
Okay, and but there is peace work still, peace research and peace education still going on there at Hawaii.
Yes,
but it's not called Peace Studies program. Is that right?
Yeah. It's still called Peace Studies. The overall program is called the Matsunaga Institute for Peace, after Senator Spark Matsunaga, who was one of the people involved with setting up the U.S. Institute of Peace, and was our senator for many, many years. So yeah, that still exists, and we still have an undergraduate major and an undergraduate certificate, and we have a graduate certificate in conflict resolution. But we were never able to develop the master's degree. The support at the presidential level at the university dwindled when the money went away. So we carry on both the undergraduate major and the graduate certificate.
The dwindling occurred everywhere. It was not just a matter of money. Yeah. It was also a matter of interest, because just as the peace movement as a movement declined when the Cold War ended, because people thought we've handled that. There's nothing to worry about anymore. I think the interest among the students also declined, although I still had quite a few who were engaged when I retired. So anyway, I think
yeah, there were lots and lots of both peace studies programs and but there were also peace research institutes, both at the governmental level and the international level, and lots of those, including Canada's Peace Institute, disappeared, and Australia's, and Denmark's, and so on. Long-standing, powerful institutes. So it was certainly not just the loss of funding. There was a right-wing backlash in some cases, in some countries, and in some cases, just the lack of interest.
Thank you. Now, I'm a little unsure whom to go to next, because I don't know what got started first. I think Conrad Grebel has been doing peace stuff for hundreds of years. I sort of have a feeling you were born with,
Well, I know 1984, Ernie Reguer, I got my first job for Project Plowshares. My very, very first job through Father Bob Ogle, when peace was something popular. I think Meta's probing at whether peace studies has dissipated because of the end of the Cold War, or whether it's other factors like the Canadian Institute for International Peace and Security being closed down by the conservative government. So Nathan, you go ahead. I'm very interested to hear what you have to say about the.
And actually, you're saying that Nathan takes priority in time. Is that right?
I think Nathan, because they're Western, where I'm at, I'll talk about that later, does not have a focused peace and conflict studies program.
Yeah, so I'm at Conrad Grebel University College at the University of Waterloo. So it's a bit of a dual affiliation and arrangement that has worked well for peace and conflict studies. Conrad Grebel University College is a Mennonite affiliated institution, which helps to explain how from the early 70s there was peace coursework offered there, leading to an interdisciplinary minor by, I believe it was 1977. I think I've got the date right there. That was formed by Conrad Grebel's collaboration with various departments at the University of Waterloo. And all of our students, both in our undergrad and now our master's program, are students both of Grebel and of the University of Waterloo. And so it's a good arrangement, because we are based at a small institution that has lots of constituency support for peace studies, peace and conflict studies, but we're also at the table of a larger institution that brings a lot of students and diverse backgrounds and collaborators in different academic departments. I was hired in 2004 to help bring about a bachelor's degree, an undergraduate major in peace and conflict studies, which hadn't existed yet, even though there was a long experience with the undergraduate interdisciplinary minor. And then by the late 90s, professional conflict management certificate program aimed more at people doing, domestic conflict management, mediation, work within organizations, restorative justice, those sorts of tracks. So we got our BA in 2005, and I would say that there was a lot of interest in it at our institution in a bachelor's degree in peace and conflict studies program, even in 2005, because the framework allowed students to tailor a course of studies that was half from unique offerings of our department and half from political science or sociology or social development, psychology, various other partner departments, environmental studies. So it could be a very flexible curriculum for students with an interest in peace and social justice, broadly defined. So the first 10 years, every year, more or less there was growth up to, well, I'd say up to about 2013 or 14. I'd have to look at the chart exactly. The enrollment has softened a bit in years since for various reasons. We're not a program at an international affairs school, so our curriculum isn't oriented first and foremost towards issues like arms control or international organizations, confidence and security building measures, or track to diplomacy, although we try to point at those in the curriculum as a presence alongside a range of other applications that are a bit more experience near for our students and closer to the lived reality of more of our students. But anyways,
elaborate on that, please, because I'm not, I'm trying to guess what what you mean by closer to experience, like conflict resolution or
conflict resolution,
that kind of thing.
Restorative justice, the idea of working for a civil society organization and NGO is appealing to many students. I mean, we still do have students who are interested in international experience and connections. A few who want to go to Ottawa and are interested in international affairs, double majors with political science and so forth. But more of them are trying to imagine a path for themselves closer to Southern Ontario.
Yeah. Do they? That's a very important question. Does your program actually lead anywhere for those people who want to get a job in government or international organizations? My impression is that the students that took peace studies from me at the University of Toronto's Mississauga campus didn't really expect to get a job, and it was more like studying, Italian or philosophy or some, humanities course, because it did not necessarily equip you for, and I don't think any of my students ever even applied for a job in government. But it's too bad, because if it were a little bit more professionally oriented, it might have done good for them. They might have benefited from that in a lot of other ways. So tell me, does your program lead anywhere in terms of a career?
Okay, well, I mean, a lot to cover there. I mean, there are some who are driven to reach in those directions and who have done that. Just a bit more about the programs first, and then I'll circle back around if you don't mind. I'd say the undergraduate program has declined a bit in enrollment over the last decade. Part of that is competition from other programs at the university that have a lot of social justice content. So there are new offerings or strengthened offerings in, say, gender and social justice. Social justice development program has blossomed and grown larger. Legal studies has become a big program for people with an advocacy bent. And so there are just more other offerings that relate to those types of pursuits. In 2012, we started a master's degree in Peace and Conflict Studies, Master of Peace and Conflict Studies program. And it is officially a professional program. And what that really means is there was a funding line from the Ontario government for a course-based program rather than a thesis-based program. And so how can this then become a program that prepares people for, yes, if they want to go to grad school beyond this, a PhD, it could, and we try to give them lots of good research opportunities, but also try to equip them for, work in the civil society sector or in other peace-related applications. So that's one of our challenges there, is how do we make sure this master's program gives our students a sense not just that they're good analysts, but they could, through internships and active learning and other means, develop an attunement to some competencies that are relevant to work in a sector that they care about for meaningful work, but has maybe fewer employment opportunities perhaps than some other sectors. That's another matter. But I have always said that an undergraduate degree in peace and conflict studies is a good undergraduate major, and it can do for you what a good education can do, but it's less defined. It takes a little more explanation to one's parents and whatnot, and a bit more of a sense of self-direction and initiative from students to envision a pathway. It's a little harder to explain than history or some other majors, for example.
Oh, my pathway was like Carolyn's in political science, but I did my BA honors in international relations at the University of Saskatchewan. And that was one of the first international relations programs, and they now have a certificate of peace studies, Saskatchewan. Then I went to the University of Toronto for my MA and my PhD. That's now the Monk School of International Affairs. So you can do a master's there as well in peace and conflict studies, more oriented toward that or toward international relations. After I did my PhD, I did a postdoc in Ottawa, and then I came here to Western. So I've been here for 30 years. I initially taught courses in international relations, and these courses ballooned from 100 to 200. But then during COVID, I went online, and my class on global diplomacy and peace, has 1,500 students in it. And it could have more. I could have 3,000 students in it. The reason is all the students that are taking it are in everything across campus: aviation, physics, teaching, education, political science, law, whatever. They can all take an elective. And so what I realized is that I wanted to train global citizens about global diplomacy and peace, but with a view to training them because they're going on in somewhere else, law or teaching or anything that's a professional program or just getting a BA. So then I branched out more, and I teach another course called Global Violence and Justice. So there you're getting at the justice part, and that also has 1,500 students in it. And then I also teach another course, which I'm just finishing right now, which has 1,800 students in it. And that's on Canadian foreign policy. Well, it's thousands of students. It's gone up, but only by making sure that the students are they're in a field where they can get a job, and they can say to their parents, yeah, I'm going to law school, or but I'm not doing peace work. I'm not doing peace studies, but I'm taking this course that's teaching me to talk about nuclear weapons, nuclear war, biological warfare, solutions, and Canadian solutions for all types of conflicts. So I really do focus quite a lot, especially in this latest class, on Canadian UN, all sorts of NATO solutions. So like you're saying, but then how I'm grabbing them like an octopus is pulling them in for their single elective.
I want to back up. I want you to, I'm still stunned by what I've just learned, because I've been going around telling people, this woman teaches like 1,600 students.
No,
and I can't, and nobody will believe me. It's not possible.
It's possible because I'm online, and multiple choice questions are online, exams are online, and they all would like to be, a student wrote to me today from China. I'm already back in China. He's going to take the exam. Everything is online. And so that's, I think, Nathan, the trick is to offer more online classes so they can go on exchange in third year, so that they can do their own thing, but they're taking one or two of your classes. And that brings in huge amounts of money into my building, into social science, because of the provincial formula for teaching. So if you have someone who wants to teach that, and you offer it right across campus, and then I bring in guests. I've brought in 48 diplomats and academics. So they speak at the end of each 2-hour section for a good 20 minutes. And then because I'm bringing in that very high profile person, I have to prepare them to listen to that profile person and then answer questions. So usually they're ambassadors. Retired ambassadors are very good because they speak much more. They're a lot more frank. You do not want a government employee. They're too careful.
But now
a retired ambassador is perfect.
You're saying that you're teaching close to 5,000 students
a year. Every academic September to April, 4,800. But it could be more, Meta. It could be more. I'm a very large university, so I think there's 27, 33. But at the graduate level, which Nathan was talking about and Carolyn, are there any students, Nathan, that are now doing what I did, which was international relations with a focus more on, Johan Galtung, like Carolyn was talking about, that was great, and talking about the hero. I audited Anatole Rappaport's class when I was at the PhD program. When they started the conflict studies, I did Tad Holmberg Dixon. I mean, on and on, right? So are you at the graduate level? Can you do it? Or
Right. Well, that's a
I don't
good
know.
question. And I wanted to ask you if your courses are also covering gen ed requirements. As it sounds like maybe they are, or is it just word of mouth that gets this tremendous enrollment?
I don't know what you mean by gen ed.
Or is it covers an area requirement in some way?
No, it's all
It's just
optional. It's
all
just
optional.
optional.
Okay.
Engineering students take it and so on.
Okay.
I mean,
Fascinating.
because
Yeah.
there's not that many large online courses, and they truly do want the freedom to do the exam right now the exam period is between the 13th and 30th. They
Mhm.
want freedom so they can work on their 4 main courses, which are very tough,
Mhm.
and then they can time it. So online
Yeah.
is the way to go, from
Right.
my perspective.
Interesting. Yeah. Some of our best enrollment courses these days are online. They're not at that scale. Like we have an online conflict resolution course that routinely draws, 140 plus students, and a history of peace movements course at over 100, and another online roots of conflict, violence, and peace course that does include a bit of international relations, as well as various conflict factors and dynamics. And that one's maybe 50 or 60 online. So we haven't had anything that's a tremendous hit in the way, same way as yours, but that is a source of ongoing interest, especially since the pandemic. Uh,
Yeah.
in our master's program, we are in the same town as the Balsillie School, which is a resource for us in some respects in terms of having some good elective coursework students can take. I mean, it's also, if there are two students in international affairs, sometimes they can get a bigger scholarship there, but
Yeah. My
nonetheless,
PhD student, my MA student came there, and he was my PhD student. He came
mhm,
from Balsillie. He got
mhm,
money at Balsillie. He decided
yeah,
to come to Western to do
mhm,
his PhD. That's sort of a familiar story, that they'll go
mhm,
somewhere else for their PhD if they did
mhm,
their MA with
yeah.
you at Balsillie, with Waterloo. Sorry.
Yeah, and we have had, students pursue further study there in the PhD track. In our curriculum for the master's program, we have a conflict analysis course, which doesn't go too deep into international relations, but we try to learn protracted social conflict theory, looking at, political, communal, economic, social factors of all sorts, arms trade. So we do have more of the overlapping content in some of the coursework with, international affairs based
Yeah.
peace programs, as well as an orientation towards um, thinking about, say, what does peace building mean in Canada for relations with Indigenous communities? Can we go on a field trip to Six Nations, um, and really try to be accountable for uh, conflict legacies and oppressive relations that are close to home, and then enter, comparatively into thinking about the larger world, and encourage internships both very local and internationally.
Now, listen, all of you have been or still are involved with organizations of peace educators and peace researchers. And that gives you a perspective, I think, on what the trends are, what is going on in the world of peace education, higher education. What trends are there? You can say, I'd love to hear what topics you try to cover. Make sure that you get covered in the courses that you offer, either ones you teach or the ones in your program. But also, I think you're in touch with other programs that still exist and can give me an overview about any trends that are going on in the curriculum of peace research and peace education. And then I want to ask a little bit about your experience with the different generations of students, because you've all been teaching for a while, and you know whether there are changes in the attitudes and the feelings of the students who are taking your courses, and whether we can see anything about the future in the attitudes that they display. But first, give me an overview. Maybe Carolyn, are you still sufficiently in touch with PSA or any? Oh, you're with ISA, aren't you? So the International Studies Association would be a good way to assess what is happening in terms of the curriculum that's being offered in various universities.
Yeah, I'm no longer involved with either PSA or IPRA, though I was very active in leadership in both of those at an earlier stage. I've pretty much gravitated to International Studies Association, which I have always been in a number of different sections, in the peace studies sections, and the environmental studies section, and the international organization section. But interestingly enough, the people in those different sections don't usually cross across those sections. In ISA, the biggest section is the strategic studies section, which studies war and nuclear weapons and so forth and so on. But within peace studies, there aren't a lot of people who do that. I'm not sure why. People who focus on war, yes, but it's much more on the social and political dynamics of war, and the question of exploitation, and the justice relationships that Nathan was talking about. A tremendous interest in justice and anti-exploitation. In the other area, Nathan, you mentioned Indigenous studies. Indigenous studies is very big in our political science department here at UH, but not in the peace studies program. And I'm not sure what the story is there. But in some ways, if you look at the changes in peace education, it is clearly spreading around the world to areas where it has not been. In the last essay I did in Lester Kurtz's Encyclopedia of Conflict, Violence, and Peace, I've done three versions now of the Peace Studies Overview, beginning in 2008 and most recently into 2022. Where you've got this decline in many of the developed countries, both in peace studies and in peace research institutes, you've got the increase elsewhere. And Africa, for example, there's lots of peace studies growing, and it's both the justice focus and the war focus and the conflict resolution focus, so not always in the same places. In both the University of Hawaii and I think lots of other places, you also have this incorporation of environmental studies. Though, again, there's nobody else that does environmental studies within the peace studies program, and nobody else that does environmental studies within our political science department, but all over the rest of the university, there's lots of it. So the linkages are not necessarily being made, but the advent of these other fields is important. In this last version I did of the Peace and Conflict Studies Overview, I debated whether to say that peace studies was at its end and had failed, or whether it had succeeded entirely by completely remaking the field of international relations and peace studies. And I think you can argue either of those things.
Wow. Now, you said something to me the other day that totally surprised me. And it's related to what Nathan was saying about Indigenous studies. I had no idea that there was a concern in Hawaii about autonomy for Indigenous Hawaiian people, or some like a movement for sovereignty for Hawaii or something. Tell me, does anybody else know that this is going on? Because I'd never heard of it.
Oh yeah, it's very, very much a phenomenon here in Hawaii in terms of the political dynamics. There are a lot of Native Hawaiians, but not by any means a majority. There are lots of hybrid Native Hawaiians plus Japanese or plus Caucasian or plus Chinese or plus Filipino, and so on. And many of the Native Hawaiians themselves have had a long-term interest in Hawaiian sovereignty. So, for example, when we had the nationwide No Kings rallies, we didn't have a No Kings rally in Hawaii because some of the Hawaiian sovereignty people still hark back to the monarchy, the Hawaiian monarchy, as the highlight of what it was. So we had a No Dictators rally instead of a No Kings rally, which struck me as rather interesting. But yeah, it's very much a part of Hawaii politics. But in terms of whether it is politically viable, I think that's a different question.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you.
Lots of interest among students in Hawaiian language, and Hawaiian culture, and Hawaiian politics.
Amanda asked about the International Studies Association. Yeah, I was involved with that, and also the Canadian Political Science Association for years. And I was one of those people who was in the strategic studies side of it, Carolyn, but coming at it from a very critical perspective about deterrence. And so then since then, I just co-edited the Peace Research Journal with a guy from State University who was the director of their Peace and Conflict Studies program, Frederick Pearson. And that's one of their most prominent Peace and Conflict Studies programs. So I was the associate editor for Peace Research, and then I put forward the idea that we do a thematic one on criticisms of deterrence. So we had a guy, Guy Roberts, who just spoke at the No Kings rally, who submitted a paper that was in favor of deterrence because he was President Trump's Assistant Secretary of Defense. So, of course, he was in favor of deterrence. So I'm very used to taking on and interacting with the people who are pro-deterrence, pro-military spending, pro-nuclear modernization. That's what my expertise is in. But that's a very, very narrow niche. And then in terms of peace studies, I am the president of the Canadian Peace Research Association. I can attest, Nathan, that we are declining in membership because we're part of Congress, the Federation of Humanities and Social Sciences, which has not met in a single university place for basically a year now. We met at Georgia Brown last year. The membership goes down of pure peace research in my association, the CPRA. And we are always trying to work with Manitoba, the University of Manitoba, Saskatchewan, because they have St. Thomas More, and then, of course, isolated people at Dalhousie in Vancouver, and so on. So it's not like peace research has died, but it has definitely declined. And so I guess what I'm saying to people, Carolyn, is stay in the ISA, stay in CPRA, stay in stay in the Canadian Political Science Association and then branch out to the United States and try to network with people there as well. So that's what you have to do, because you're going to be by yourself. I'm really quite by myself in my department. My department is more methodology. So that's what you have to do. You just have to reach out nationally and reach out internationally. So that's all I want to do. Hot pursuit, Nathan, because I think Meta's last question, I don't really know how to answer. I don't know the answer to her last question. What do students think? I don't really know, because they're all online.
I have two different questions. One is I'm still trying to get a global perspective on what is happening in terms of the curriculum of peace studies. There are different.
Okay, right.
She's mentioned that it's booming in Africa. That's something new to me. I didn't know that. But what is booming? What are they teaching in these programs? And is it the same thing everywhere? If we got, the professors of peace studies from Africa and from Hawaii and from Toronto together, would they agree on very much? And what would the course outlines look much alike? So that's one line of conversation. But then, of course, I want some impressions that you have about the attitude of the students and how that has changed over the last 2 or 3 decades since peace studies was booming. But let's do the first thing first, the overview. Do you have a perspective on that?
No, lots there to think about, and I'd like to thank Erika for the work she's doing. Thank you, Erika, for trying to keep CPRA going and keep an active platform for peace research in Canada, because that's important. I think that there are strong influences of peace research on international relations that you can find in, say, the Peace Studies section at International Studies Association. I think those conversations are still really important when, like, for example, you hear quotes coming out of Washington, D.C., just terribly abusing Thucydides and using him to justify the worst policies. So we still need to engage in international relations. Let's read these texts thoughtfully and deeply and critically and see what we can learn about the failures of power politics and the tragic aspects of those works and the critique that's present within them. That's another tangent. I think the peace and conflict studies, there are it is becoming a more multi-centered field internationally, and there is also a desire to have more regionally rooted approaches to peace and conflict studies around the world. You'll see, like, most of the new edited volumes coming out in the field, readers have plenty of decolonial content. How do we not be too intellectually dependent on a small stable of Western authors, and how do we root what we're doing in our own context and traditions? So that's definitely a strong current. What are our students interested in? I see, to echo, what Carolyn was saying, there's a lot of justice interest among students who come our way in our program here in Ontario, students who are paying attention to various social justice movements that are in their field of vision and in the social media networks they participate in, so that they care a lot about, in Canada, Indigenous justice, racial justice, gender injustice. There are many different facets. The themes that we've been exploring collectively, societally, on trauma are on the minds of students. But sometimes I think it's important to also encourage the new conversations and welcome the chance to engage Indigenous communities and neighbors and think about colonialism and think about economic inequality and all these various structural violence issues Well, at the same time, I hope retaining some lessons of common security and uh, dialogue at various levels that are critical. You know, how can we revive perhaps conversations on reformist approaches to global governance that are important for the future, global public goods and so forth. So can we toggle back and forth between the macro and the micro sufficiently and in ways that are dynamic and inviting? So I see that as important to the future of the field, to think on different scales and
Can I mention,
yeah.
Nathan, on the topic of common security, which is going to be a big theme for Canadian Pugwash Group, which I'm on the board of. The Canadian Network to Abolish Nuclear Weapons set up an essay contest for students with very lucrative prizes to write on common security, and they got a lot of entries.
Okay.
So just to write on the concept of common security, which of course contrasts greatly with the Republicans and President Trump's focus on neorealism and war and a horrible version of Thucydides and Hobbes, or whatever they're trying to tarnish. But common security is one way to go. So that's what they've put forward as an essay contest with quite a good amount of money. Carolyn, I'm very curious what you think about the students of today and yesterday, and have they become more cynical and more oriented toward their careers, or do you think there's a shred of hope? I do think that there's a lot of hope, but
Yes, that very definitely more cynical. Very definitely more interested in their careers. Last semester we were working at the university level and still are on a revision of our general education program. And several of the students in my undergraduate peace studies, war and peace course said, "Why do we need general education? Why should you force me into all of these subjects about, the age of Pacific and indigenous and war, peace, and so forth and so on? I'm here to get a job." And there was general agreement, much to my shock, from the students in that class. In now, my undergraduate class, I'm doing the environmental studies, and I asked them this morning. This is a global environmental politics course, and most of the students in it are either natural science majors, biology, natural resource students, but there are also substantial numbers of political science. I don't think I have any that are peace studies majors, and they said, of course, they're interested in sustainable development and environmental issues, but also they're concerned about the war in Iran. They're concerned about, very much concerned about climate and climate change, but also concerned about things like AI. And I followed that up by saying, well, is your concern about the AI a problem about it deteriorating the learning process? Or is it about how it is affecting, water and electricity? And their answer was both.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a lot of students using AI. I prohibit it in my classes, and I still get it. And there are a lot of students who intensely dislike AI. So that debate is going on at the student level, not just at the faculty level of, how do you get them to be creative thinkers? But the concerns, the concerns are not that much different. Incredible lack of knowledge and lack of interest in nuclear weapons and arms control and disarmament. In my Problems of War and Peace course, there used to be substantial interest in that area, and there just isn't anymore. That interest has been replaced by some of the interest in environmental issues, and the justice interest continues. And that's not just in peace studies. It's in political science. It's in just about every field.
Well, that's encouraging. Anyway, everything you said to that point kind of was disappointing. But and beside the two aspects of AI that you mentioned, there are. I put that personally at the top of my list of threats now. That the most dangerous thing in the world right now is not nuclear war. It's AI, but it's not either of the two things that you mentioned. I mean, I don't think it's rotting kids' brains or my brain, but it may be a little bit. But the environmental impact, certainly it's using up water and resources and electricity that should be used in other ways. But the job situation, what it's going to do to the economy is certainly serious, but also the real threat is that the agents, AI agents, they don't know how to control them. Even the top people are very pessimistic about whether or not these things are going to take over and we're done for, because they have no need for us. And that is a really real issue, but I doubt that very many students or even general readers of newspapers and so on have that as their top focus, as a real concern, which is what I would put at the worst problem in the world right now. Anyway,
I don't put my curriculum doesn't really. My curriculum still focuses very much in the global violence class on nuclear weapons and nuclear deterrence, learning about the impact of Hiroshima, learning about the Cold War, and learning about the current nuclear stockpile. And Mr. Trump, I'm going to have a lot of fun putting all of his comments in about blasting Iran. And the students are interested, but they're also terrified, I think, Carolyn. And it's a very terrifying topic, and they want to learn about it, but they are afraid. And so my job is to just make the language accessible to them so that they feel confident to talk about it. Most of them high school students know a lot about climate change. They know a ton about AI, a lot about AI, but they don't know about biological weapons and chemical weapons. They don't know about the politics of the Middle East. And so that's my job, is to introduce them in easy, accessible language to topics that they may be very worried about talking about, but we do it. So I'm not really caring so much. I mean, I agree with you, Meta, that AI, and we've talked about that, is a threat, but I still think nuclear war and a nuclear winter and the impact of a regional war in the Middle East or between India and Pakistan is the number one threat that we face, but that's my opinion. I'll tell the students that's what I think, but then they might think it's something else. Who knows? So all I want to emphasize I think my closing comment here is that I still think that nuclear issues are very, very important.
Yeah, I just would caution against separating AI from war, because the use of AI in killer robots or other ways that now make the weapons of war are totally being under the change. I don't even know why anybody bother with creating nuclear bombs anymore, because you can do the same thing for cheaper with drones and AI. And
we talk about the merchant of death, the Iran merchant of death, and drones, and we talk about all types of weapons, but we also talk about peaceful like Minsk Accord or anything to do with Ukraine or anything that's more peaceful, because I can't leave them to be disempowered where they think that there's no solution. I actually have slides that show them voluntary organizations that they can work with all around the world, and they're expected to go through it all and be able to answer questions. So I have to have a positive, empowering part. And I think, Nathan, you're nodding a lot because you agree. We have to do that with young people.
Yeah. So there's so many issues to be concerned about, and we shouldn't be surprised if they feel overwhelmed at times. And we as professors are feeling a little overwhelmed in recent years, from COVID to AI and all these transformations we have to adjust to. And I find still, though, sometimes professors, we struggle to strike the right balance or get just the right blend of the critical and the affirmative. And I think if we can put those together, the critical awareness that, there are big challenges and we need to confront them head on and with clear eyes, but we also need to recognize that there are solutions, there are pathways. What you do matters. The values you affirm matter. We as professors want to help you find a path that is meaningful. So getting that right balance and integrated message, it's not always easy for us to do as profs, but I think it's really valuable and important.
I'm so glad you said that, because I was hearing us in a way come up to divided opinion. Most of what Carolyn said I found pretty discouraging. Erika has kept the faith by focusing where we started, focusing on nuclear weapons, and not swerving off course, and that's terrific.
I have in my own life for my own career, but what I teach is a huge diversity. I mean, the other day, though, on the topic of AI, last year, Nathan, I suggested they could get bonus points for writing a UN resolution on any topic they wanted. I received the most beautiful UN resolutions I've ever seen.
Really?
Because I used to do a UN simulation, with 200 ambassadors, and they were using AI. And AI was creating the most beautiful resolutions ever. And I immediately, after about 100 of them came in, I stopped the assignment. I said, everyone who just did it, okay, you can get it, even though you don't deserve it. And then we're stopping. And the whole class was, but I didn't get my opportunity. Well, too bad, because I just canceled this.
Wow.
So AI is changing, like how everything.
Oh, I use AI, and it's smarter than I am, for sure.
Oh, of course. It's the whole world's internet coming to help us, sitting beside us, helping us. So I'm very positive, but also very worried, like the Russian floppy disks with the nuclear weapons. How are they going to cope with AI on NATO's part? So it's going to be interesting. Hopefully there won't be any accidental nuclear war.
It's a heck of a challenge, the ambivalence that I have. I've never had this much ambivalence toward anything in my life. I'm totally enthusiastic about AI, and I'm terrified of it. And I think there are good reasons for both. I love the way Nathan summed things up, that we are ourselves torn, I think, about how to look at the world, and how pessimistic or how encouraging to be. Or how much we can take heart ourselves. So
critical and affirmative. I like that, Nathan. I think that's an interesting way to frame it. Critical and affirmative. That's what we have to be. Thank you for that insight.
Thank you all. I've enjoyed this so much. I wish I'd done it years ago. So let's do it again sometime, and keep up with how things are changing. And all good wishes to all of you. And I keep it up. You're doing great work, and I appreciate it so much. Thanks.
Thanks so much for inviting us.
Thanks, Meta.
Thank you for bringing us together.